Well, massive information to share with you guys today. We are literally experiencing a global crisis, and I believe unlike we have ever seen before. Right now, we have communists and progressive and Democrats who are in charge and leading the way. And as a result, we are being led into our very own destruction. Right now, we've got inflation, at least unlike we have ever seen before here in the United States of America. And on a global scale, we're seeing inflation pretty much everywhere, not to mention food shortages, food crises, riots over these new Green Deal agendas, and our fuel skyrocketing unlike we have ever seen before. Our fuel, our oil, our gas, all of that entire industry, our economies are breaking apart. And what are these communists at the top doing? Absolutely nothing. Instead, they are making matters worse. And here's their latest ploy. Right now, over in France, they are hiring or putting together a group of about 3,000. That's just to start. A 3,000-man, brand new green police force. No joke. Let's just kick people while they're down and enforce more of this green policy that is literally destroying countries. But let's start with some of this food crisis that we're seeing, because I think that all of this is relevant information. And by the way, I've got a clip by mainstream media at the very end of this. I believe it was Joy Reid who's saying we're already in the middle of a civil war and the conservatives are the at fault party. But of course, you know, when you have nothing but dictators and their media pulling their strings, the only people they're going to attack is the one standing for freedom, and that would be conservatives. But let's dive into what's going on with this food crisis, because I think this is something that should hit home for all of us, because this is going to impact all of us, even though some of this is happening overseas, but it's not just overseas. I'm going to start with Germany. Here's Breitbart. Global food crisis, 50% crop loss, likely due to drought, German farmers say. And that's big because remember, it's an international shipping trade, right? Up to half of the crops in part of the German state Baden-Württemberg are likely to be lost due to drought. Farmers in the region have claimed, with problems to do with the price of fuel, the fertilizer, and pesticides connected to the little green agenda there and the war in Ukraine, also reportedly causing problems for those in the region. Now, here's what else is going on in Germany. This is Breitbart. Gas shortage riots to make lockdown protests look like a children's birthday party, says officials. Gas shortages in Germany brought about by a combination of long-term government mismanagement and Russia's war in Ukraine are likely to prompt mass riots that will make previous anti-lockdown demos look like a children's birthday party. An official has claimed, and those aren't my words, a warning from the president of Thuringian's Office for the Protection of the Constitution during an interview with the state-owned broadcaster ZDF on Wednesday has crystallized the issue somewhat, with the official responsible for maintaining the security of the contemporary German state in the region warning that mass violence was now looking likely. And here's a quote. After the pandemic and the world's events of the last few months, we are dealing with a highly emotional, aggressive, pessimist mood among the population, whose trust in the states, its institution, and political actors is at least in some parts afflicted with massive doubts. President Stephen Kramer is reported telling the broadcaster. He goes on, in this respect, we are likely to be confronted with mass protests and riots, he warned, saying that what Germany had experienced so far in the COVID pandemic in the form of the violent clashes on social networks, but also on streets and squares, was probably more of a children's birthday party compared to what was coming. In other words, they're expecting it to get a little bit more crazy, at least over there in Germany. And again, these are policies. There's policies over there that they're purposely pushing on their people, like these green agendas and these policies that are causing people to wake up and say, hey, I can't heat my home. I'm going to need firewood just to survive because you're putting caps on my AC, which, by the way, speaking of these AC caps, I predicted this years ago, at least 2 years ago on my channel, restrictedrepublic.com. I talked about all of this. You guys who have been watching me already know that. And believe me, if it's happening in other countries and they're still pushing this green agenda, then it's going to happen here in the US. But get to restrictedrepublic.com. And right now there is explosive information. I've got a brand new interview clip, but use the coupon code FJB to get the entire first year for $3.99 per month. And by the way, I don't make much on that. It's a big decrease in price due to what we're currently going through. But with that, it's not just Germany and that is experiencing this. We also know Sri Lanka. We also know Venezuela. We also know multiple countries are also seeing this as well. And there's also farming industries that are now struggling all over the place, from Dublin to France. Here we got here. Sputnik News. France loses up to 35% of vegetable crops due to drought. Association of Producers. We also have Breitbart. Italian farmers face crisis as the war in Ukraine sees animal feed, fuel, fertilizer prices all surge as well. So all over Europe, and pretty much a majority of our countries, on top of these green policies, we also now have weather and drought that is affecting our food supply. So bottom line here, I want you to be ready. And it's not just internationally. Let's just check out what's happening right now in the United States of America, right? Take a look, fb.org. A new AFBF survey shows drought increasing toll on farmers and ranchers. And here's what it says kind of in the middle of the text. Across the surveyed region, respondents expected average crop yields to be down 38% this year because of drought conditions, with the biggest drop expected in Texas. Yields reported down about 68%, Oklahoma 60%, New Mexico 54%, and Washington down 8%. And then it goes on to talk about some other stuff there, but that kind of gives you an overall idea. And this is on top of everything else that is going on an international level, not to mention the Ukraine war and what the Biden administration is doing here in the United States of America. Here's some more on that. We have tomato shortages emerge in drought-stricken California as ketchup prices soar, and that's Zero Hedge, also on Zero Hedge. Potato shortages emerge in Idaho as price surge at supermarket. Then we have Western Journal, near total crop losses ravaging U.S. agriculture. South Carolina farmers sound the alarm on tragic harvest season. And then we also have CNNbusiness.com. American farmers are killing their own crops and selling cows because of extreme drought. Then here's a Politico report, just kind of a conclusion on this, but Politico.com and Politico.eu, this is out of the European Union, but the world food crisis is about to get worse. Millions are facing starvation as war combines with finance and climate-driven shocks. Yes, you heard that right. Mainstream media actually admitted that. 6 months of fighting between Russia and Ukraine, two farming powerhouses, has plunged a teetering global food system into a full-blown catastrophe, leaving millions of people facing starvation. The war is exacerbating a crisis already fueled by climate change, soaring cost of living, and a fertilizer price hike that is creating the most acute global food crisis in decades. Now, I wouldn't quite use the word acute, but here we're actually having one of the worst crises that we have seen in decades, right? And what does the Biden administration do right now? We're not having a recession. He continues to deny our recession. Take a look here. Despite what all economists are saying, dailymail.co.uk, 97% of U.S. executives believes the U.S. is now in a recession or close to one, despite Biden's constant denials. So why would Biden want to deny it? Because he doesn't want that head. Well, he can go... You can fill in the blank on what I want to say there. But I digress. Instead of fixing the issue, you can't fix an issue that you're constantly denying exists, right? There's no recession, so I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist, even though you are suffering and about to suffer far worse than we have in a very long time, in decades. So instead, he is pushing his Green New Deal. They just signed their Inflation Fake Reduction Act, which doesn't reduce any inflation. In fact, it makes it worse, according to a lot of economists there. And on top of that, they're going to send 80,000 IRS agents to your home. And yes, they did arm some of them. Obviously not all, but some of them are armed, according to their job new list posting there. Good to Restrictive Republic. If you want more information on that particular, I don't want to sidetrack. But meanwhile, they are pushing these Green New Style agendas in his Inflation Reduction Act, and this is giving green incentives to companies to go more green. In fact, over in France right now, instead of fixing some of the problems that they're having, they're hiring and putting together and recruiting 3,000 man army, and that's just the start of climate green police. Take a look. Breitbartnews.com, and its headline, Great Reset. French government to recruit 3,000 green police over climate change. Harold Darmanin, who serves as France's Minister of the Interior, has announced that he aims to create 3,000 posts for new green police officials, a move that he has deemed necessary in the face of tackling climate change. In an interview with Le Journal de Dimanche, Darmanin justified the creation of 3,000 new posts specifically aimed at green-related climate issues by citing the effects of climate change and the effects that it was having on France, especially in regards to forest fires, 9 out of 10 which have allegedly been caused to human activity. Catch that right there. We're going to stop the fires even though the humans are the ones causing it. Let's move on. We have therefore decided to massively reinforce the resources of the central office for the fight against damage to the environment and to launch a 3,000 green police post. And he continues, it will be a revolution indeed for them because they're on a power trip. But the reason I wanted to show you this article is because if they're doing this in France, and this is part of their Great Reset agenda. The organizations like the United Nations are calling for this. The World Economic Forum are calling for this. And mark my words, if they're doing that in France, the goal and agenda is to do something like that here in the United States of America. Can you imagine? They're already putting the social, environmental governance score on our industries and businesses, which basically is a way to say, hey, don't look at that gun shop over there or this guy that's not hiring diversity, equity, whatever they new term they want to call it. You should hire based off of your skill level, regardless of the color of your skin, right? You hire based off merit, not off the color of your skin. If you're not doing that, we're going to take your ESG score down and, there you go, and just stick it to the man. But basically would encourage investors away from certain companies and make more progressive, liberal, communist countries thrive. This is exactly what's happening. And if they're hiring this 3,000 police force, imagine that police force in conjunction with the environmental social governance score, harassing businesses and people if you don't set your thermostat at a certain level or fill in the blank in the future, right? If it's happening in France, it could very well happen here. Meanwhile, we've got the mainstream media talking about we're already in a civil war, and at that same breath, she calls conservatives and Republicans, all of us, fascists. This is causing division. Take a look.
You're saying, Tone, we have to deal with the rhetoric. And, I agree with you, but it's not really rhetoric we can deal with. I mean, you have millions of people tuning into a propaganda network every night. And then, as if that were not bad enough, that's an extremist network itself. You have these fringe pop-up outlets, from OWN to Newsmax. Then you have the social media component. That train has left the station. There is no let's deal with the rhetoric. At this point, I do think we have to have serious conversations around preparing for actual violence. People keep saying a civil war is coming. I would say a civil war is here. And I don't mean to be hyperbolic. We can look at what has happened just in the past week alone. Since all this has happened, we've had 2 people try to declare war with FBI field offices. I don't think at this point we're going to all pack up our bags and go home and sing Kumbaya.
Wow. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. No, I just accused an entire group of people, tens of millions, 80 some odd million at this point, about half of the United States of America, of, being so extreme that they're committing violent acts, even though that's not even happening. You see how she's building up her base? In my opinion, all you're doing is sparking division and sparking anger between the left and the right, Democrats and Republicans, by sitting there accusing them of doing something that they're not actually doing. See what she's doing there? This is insane. Oh, but don't worry, I'm not being hyperbolic. I just called Republicans fascist. I said that they're committing violent acts. Oh, and by the way, thou shalt not speak against the FBI. Do you hear that little last part there? Let me tell you something. We need to severely fire at least a big chunk of the people at the FBI, because we're not talking about 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 corruptions. We're talking about 30 to 40 some odd corruptions at this point. Something needs to happen. And here she is, because it benefits her side, or maybe, I don't know, maybe there's more to the story with her. But either way, We have an organization that is politically controlled. They need to be fired. It needs to be either disbanded, re-put together, or something of that level, and severely defunded. Anyhow, I love all of you. With that, please don't forget to check out my partner. And I've had this partner for a very long time, but it's hidewithlisa.com. If you guys don't have a VPN, then now is the time to get one. And what a VPN does is it basically acts as if the things that you're looking at on the internet are off of a completely different computer, as if you didn't see it. And this is why I encourage apps like this, because, nobody needs to know what you're looking at. It's your business and your business alone. So right now, get protected and protect yourself against those DDoS attacks and those cyber and hacker attacks. But right now, you get 50% off the entire thing. Get to hidewithlisa.com and check that out today. Anyhow, I love all of you. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Lisa Haven, signing out.